So thank you for joining us today. This is one of our skill up sessions of Design at Business in Brazil. For those who never heard about the community, we connect innovation leaders and change makers like you to learn from each other and accelerate innovation in large companies. I'm gonna share the website of our community, the Brazilian version and the global one, and I hope you join us as well. And now I'll hand over to Michael, and this is a very pleasure to us to have you, Michael, with us and sharing more about this very relevant and important topic, especially for innovation. Just go ahead.
Yes.
Thank you.
Welcome and thank you to Lillian, Elio, Mirella for inviting me here today to speak. I'm pretty excited because I see a lot of names and people that I know. I do a lot of work at Stanford as a coach, and I heard from the introduction, innovation in large companies that many of you tackle. Very tough, very tough, and all the more reason why you need power and you need to understand power because you're navigating challenging environments. Power, of course, can be used in many contexts beyond that, but we will talk about a variety of things, and I want to keep this interactive. So first, I'm going to end the poll that we had there and just share the results so you can kind of see who else is in the room. You can also look at the participant list. Clearly, this is hosted by our awesome friends in Brazil, so it's heavily represented there, but very global. I'm based here in Europe, North America, and Asia are represented. If you look at this, most of you are in large companies. This also helps me because when we're talking, there are some different dynamics. But anytime you've got more than two people, you know, organizational politics kick in. Just gets more complex as you get bigger. Functional area is a pretty even distribution between engineering, commercial, and then other. I'm not sure what that other category is. And then roles across the board here, from individual contributors to those who maybe manage a division. Half and half male, female, and age-wise, okay, you guys are younger than me. So the sweet spot there is, I won't tell you my age, older than I look, but seems like the majority of us are 30 to 50, which is really kind of the sweet spot in your career or the trajectory. And a very important time to be thinking also about some of the things I'll talk about and how that can accelerate your career, because they're very vital in that kind of 30 to 45-year-old range. And I like the range too, because some of the things I'll say will not be foreign to you. When I sometimes lecture to, 20, 22-year-olds who haven't seen the world or worked, they don't relate to some of the things. And so I've got to shift the message there. Okay, so let's get started here. And I want to just challenge your thinking today, okay? And you guys are all about innovation, so this is being exposed and thinking about new things. I'm not going to talk about innovation per se. I'm going to be talking about power. I'm going to be talking about politics in your company that often impedes the things that you're trying to get done or your own professional or personal growth. And I want to do that by starting with a poll, okay? I've posted a couple questions here. And so I want you to answer it. Let me pull up the poll for a second here. Okay. And it's a little bit artificial, but I'm only going to give you two choices. Okay. It's binary. If you could only say one or the other. All right. Don't overthink this. But I'm going to launch this first one here. Great leadership. Hey, in great leaders, is this something innate or is this something that can be learned? Okay, so just take a second here to fill that out, and I may call on someone because I want this to be the launch of a discussion because it's going to be involved in the things that we talk about. Okay, give you 1 or 2 seconds here to vote on this. And so you can see what your fellows in the room here, about 40 of you. Okay, I'm going to cut this off so we can go and share this. Hold on. Okay, share the results. Okay. So this whole field of leadership, it's a big industry. It's a big topic. And the vast majority of you, 84%, said that, hey, this is a skill that can be learned. There were 6 of you who said, hey, it's innate. And I would love right now if someone who represents the can be learned, just want to unmic themselves and just share like why you said that. Keep it brief, but so we can kind of hear why you came down on that. Don't want to have to cold call, so just feel free, right? You know, you can remain anonymous, but I'd love to hear from one person. Why is leadership something that can be learned?
Hey, Michael, Bhavin here.
Yes.
Yeah. So from my point of view, what I can say is the world is keep on changing, and the organization keep on evolving over time. So I think with that change, the leadership also evolves and keep on moving. So that is an important moving skill which every leader has to adopt and learn to keep their keep their skills at the top.
Okay, so it's almost by necessity because the world is changing, new technologies. What are we doing now? Zooming, right? This hadn't been even invented years ago. I'm curious, and this is not to pick on anyone, and again, it's a very binary question, but there were 6 of you, and you know, who chose that, and whether you chose it or you wanted to defend it, I'm just kind of curious, like, you know, there's a statistic like the majority of CEOs are taller than normal, right? Sometimes you go and I talk to executives like, this person has it, this person doesn't. And so there's maybe like this innateness but I'd love to hear from someone who wants to just share, you know, from that side. Yeah, I saw the correlation is not causation, but as a point of discussion here, anyone want to share why they think about leadership as being innate?
Hi, this is Janisha from Dubai. I'm one among 6 who said that leadership is more natural. The reason being, if you see the communication skill or the way they interact, to a certain level, they can be coached with their hand movements and with their vocabulary, what kind of words to use. But when it comes to getting things on the ground, they have to be natural. I feel that there might be some limitations for someone to be coached to be a leader. Most part of it is natural in the way they take initiatives, in the way they want problems to be solved. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And, you know, this is an interesting question. Do we have kind of a raw ability to do certain things and other things need to or cannot be coached or cannot be taught? You may think about this on your own team with your own people. I want to encourage you to think about, there may be certain things, right? You're not going to change your height, your skin color, your accent sometimes. And so there will be certain things that you cannot change, but there is many things in terms of how you show up, in terms of the choices that you make, that you absolutely can. And small differences can make a huge difference. And hopefully you believe that some skills can be learned. Otherwise, you know, what are we doing here? Is, I think, a worthwhile thing to think about. Let me give the second question. Again, as a point of departure here, if someone is political, okay, and we're going to just use that phrase, is this, and they're political in the organization, is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? Okay, binary. You know, if you had to say good or bad, what would it be? I'm launching the poll. Okay, most of you are checked in here. Okay, so I'm going to end that and I'm going to share it. So this was very interesting to me. The vast majority, you said this is a good thing. And actually a small minority said, hey, this is a bad thing. Anyone who and I can't always see everyone because of my screen and the boxes, but let's start maybe with being political is bad. Anyone want to just quickly share why they thought that or take that point of view and tell us?
I can go. Amit here.
Sure.
It may be the current climate, but if the goal of the company is to achieve something, that means we are all aligned to the same goal. So if we're all aligned to the same goal, then politics kind of just comes in the way because it puts a more individualistic perspective in than the company's goal perspective for the same. So.
Okay. So what I'm hearing from you is politics may be thinking about yourself, and that can conflict. We have this saying like what's good for the organization may not be good for the individual or vice versa.
Yep.
Right? I get an outsized bonus. That's what I care about. Whether the company does well or not is another thing. So that's a good reflection on that. Anyone want to come from the other side and just, because I've never seen numbers like this. Maybe it's because some of you have taken the Power Course, but usually political is a highly negative word, but I'm hearing most of you saying it's good. Can someone give us why that's good?
Hi, Michael.
I can say.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, Amanda. Hi, Michael. This is Surabhi. I think politics just has a negative tone to it. At times, it can drive the right optimal decision, and in fact, protect someone who's being victimized, or it can be used positively.
Okay. So it can be used positively, and that's where you came in. And just, you want to give an example of how it can be used positively?
Let's say those who say that being political is bad, sometimes there are cases where even people with merit are not given the due credit, or their ratings or their appraisals or opportunities are stalled. Whereas someone with power can use his or her political power. Someone who is in leadership can in fact help this person and bring out, or it also gives an opportunity to be resilient against the negative aspects of politics. Politics in a situation.
So I think that's a great point. I mean, almost in counter to what you were saying before, someone can use politics to be helping other people. Particularly those who maybe have more power at the top, seeing things or lifting up, sponsorship, mentorship, helping people out. So a very good point. And one of the things I'll come to, and I will cite a lot of research, but when you look at a lot of leaders and those who rise in organizations, the number one driver is their political skills. Okay? Outweighing performance, outweighing intelligence, political skills, we'll break that down later. And it's very interesting because political skills help some very toxic people rise. But that study also showed it helped very humble people rise in their organization, the political skills. So let's come back to that. Great answers. I want to launch one more as a point of discussion here. And let me pull that up. Okay, this one will, I love this one because I want to ask you here as a leader, is it better or more effective to, again, binary, you can only choose one, if you could only be one or the other, show vulnerability, admit doubt, or show command, and be decisive. So there is the poll. Take a moment. Only choose one, okay? Binary, because I want to create some discussion here. Okay. Give you a second. Okay. All right, I'm going to end this poll, and I'm going to show this to you guys. I love this question. I love this question. And boom, you guys are right down the middle on this topic. Love to have one person tell us why vulnerability. You know, we live in contentious times. We see some very contentious leaders in world politics and so forth. So they're not exactly the ones showing vulnerability. But anyone, again, I won't call because it's a little bit sometimes hard to see if someone's raising hands or whatever. Just wanted someone different, maybe unmic. And
Hi.
Why did you say vulnerability is more important or is better for a leader?
Yeah, thanks, Rohit here. So
Yep.
one of the things I feel as a leader is that you have to invite opinions from others. You have to let other people speak up. And sometimes that means that you can show vulnerability and doubt so that you can invite the experts or some of the people who might have relevant opinions to come out and share their opinion, share their point of view, which helps in making a better decision at times. So I guess this is contextual, but that's one of the reasons why I showed vulnerability rather than showing off command or showing off the decision, which may or may not be incorrect.
Okay, so fair enough. Yeah, contextual, like that showing, or you as the leader allowing kind of opinions to rise or giving people permission because of your positional power, so to speak.
Yeah,
if you bring an opinion, right? If you want more quality. Yeah, Elio.
Yeah, just adding to that, I think that also creating this safe environment for exposing problems, and so that's part of showing vulnerability. That creates a culture that we can solve problems and learn. So creating a learning organization, that's really important for us to survive, learning from our mistakes, overcome crisis. Because otherwise we have other terrible side effects in just not listening in command and control.
Yeah. Yeah. So it'd be interesting for you guys. We won't ask this question or poll it, but go look at the leaders in your own companies, the ones who particularly risen really high. Do they fall more in one of these categories or the other? Don't have to answer that, but think about that for a second. And I think there were two very interesting points here: surfacing opinions in a safe environment and why that's important. Can I have someone from the other side? Okay, half of you. This is the way we prototypically think of a leader. And if you look at most leaders, and I get this all the time coaching executives, the number one thing that I hear that stunts people, prevents them going from like director to senior director or VP, and depends somewhat on the company, as the person doesn't have presence. They don't command and show teeth, right? This is an expression that's used to, bring a strong opinion. And it prevents a lot of people, and actually hurts certain type of people like introverts or certain groups who may not express themselves in that way. But I want to hear, can someone unmic and tell us about the
hi, Michael.
showing command and being decisive? Yep, go ahead.
I feel showing command and being decisive is very important at some important crossroads in the journey of a leader, because otherwise, without having a proper decisive perspective, there's more chaos that he basically puts into the teams. Where he needs to follow a specific vision, it's very important to sort of show command and be decisive. Otherwise, most of the teams sort of start losing their direction, and it ends in chaos.
Right. And this is, I think you're saying a point that has brought up a lot you know, people are looking to you in a crisis right now of how you're going to steer the ship or follow us through. And if you say you have no idea, which maybe show vulnerability and doubt, that may ripple through your organization, right? You hear this in the military all the time. And so we'll come to some of this, and why do some people who show command or more decisive propel up in organizations faster? There's a lot of research that shows that. But think about some of the elements that you brought up. What are the conditions, right, that it may be safe to do this? How do you show weakness without ruining kind of your reputation or perceived reputation? So a lot of this is conditional. There was someone who was going to make a comment. I don't want to cut you off. No? Okay. Okay. In any case, we're gonna proceed here, and I want you to think about some of these issues as we go through. Feel free to, I'm gonna take the poll off here. You know, just so I can see in the chat box, there was one or two questions kind of at the beginning when we started, but I'd love you to just write in there, and I'm a big fan of, you know, particularly in these skill ups, you take away one thing, you know, that's useful that you can use. And, you know, be a little active here and just say, hey, was there something when you saw this topic, you know, what power can do for you, or you've been exposed to it before? Is there anything in particular that you're looking to get out of it? I'll look through and just put that in the chat board. I'm now also catching up on some of the comments earlier here. We will talk about this topic, about how most of the leadership literature does talk about vulnerability and compassion, yet we sometimes and often don't see that very much in our leaders. And the question is, why is there that disconnect? Okay. I see things of people who are now risen to new positions, how to influence. Okay, and again, thinking about your position can be important, because you may have some power just by position, right? Deference to authority or control of resources and so forth. Okay. Again, I'm going to continue, but feel free to write up there, again, what you wanted to get out of the talk, because I'd really like you to get some practical things here. And again, this is my goal, okay? It's two things. One is I want to challenge you to re-examine your beliefs about a belittled and I think misunderstood topic, which is power and politics. That is my focus. And people kind of cringe sometimes about that. But that's why I think it's really important to unpack that. And I wish that you would take away one takeaway. We'll do this also through a kind of conversation. I'll give you some kind of practical strategies through a conversation that we're going to have. Most of you here write about influence and stuff. I really want you to think about, or even write it down, whether it's to yourself or on the board, is, hey, if you had more influence, if you were more powerful, what would you get done that you can't now? I mean, go into your work, right? Is it getting the initiative to the next stage gate? Is it, you know, getting yourself promoted? Is it getting more resources for your team? I mean, it's great to say, hey, let's have more influence or power, but it's like, what do you want to get? Or what do you want your team to get out of that? Okay? Speed, right? Most of you in large organizations. So this is really, really important topic to you, how to make kind of more productive decisions. And, you know, most of you are kind of in this middle position in your organization, thinking about power from two perspectives, right? How it can kind of propel you up and get things done. And then also, if you're at the top, to some of the points, you know, that were brought up earlier, is how power or political dynamics may be playing on below you, which may filter out your ability to get information or to see what's going on. You know, if everyone's telling you what you want to hear, if everyone's trying to curry favor with you, think about that. Okay? All right. I'm going to start here with just a very quick story, okay? I wrote a piece in Harvard Business Review several years ago about an executive, Jill. Jill, there's also a Joe that this happened to also, so don't think this is confined to a woman exec. Jill, right? Multiple languages, top MBA, joined a company, really moved up the ranks, multiple different positions at senior director, doing all the right things, super hard worker, great performance reviews, was on the way up, handwritten notes from the CEO. And there was some shifts at the company, right? They had to make some strategic direction, brought an outside executive in to help drive things. And within 2 months of that change, Jill, the high flyer, boom, out on her butt, okay? And so this is when I started working with her. And the question was, someone who's doing all these right things, this is what you call a derailment, right? We talk about the train coming off the tracks, and this is not a fun place to be. When it happens to you, it happens to a surprising amount of people, so don't feel ashamed. Happens a lot of times to projects that you're running, particularly if you're trying to change things. So, if nothing else, we'll talk about what happened to Jill and some of the things that she could have been doing and why we want to talk about power and politics. But also, if this talk helps you and make sure that you don't get derailed, then I will feel very happy, because it's not a great place to be, and you take it out on your home life, your spouse, your kids. I've seen it all happen. Okay, so the warning, and I've already mentioned this, is I'm going to say some, things that are based on evidence, but contradict what you may have heard with a lot of leadership advice. Okay, we're very high on the scale of authenticity, vulnerability. These are not bad ideas, but sometimes used in the wrong contexts can hurt you. Okay, and so we need to take kind of a very empirical look at what happens and how power is built, maintained, etc. So we used to have an expression, I'm dating myself. I grew up in the States, but this where's the beef, which is kind of where's the substance here of what I'm going to say, and it comes from 3 areas. The first is social science research. A lot of very good research on how people in the organizations behave that, frankly, a lot of people don't read. But we should, because it's very helpful to us. Second is, examples. If you look at most people in power and you study them, whether you like these people or not, we can diagnose and see certain things they often do in common that helps them rise. Now, what they say at the top or what they do at the top or what you do when you rise or have more power is your choice. But the question is also how they get there, what propels them. And then third is I work with a lot of executives around the world, diverse industries, et cetera. And so, I live this because I help them and they have to do these things and put it in practice. And that's on top of their regular day jobs. So those are kind of the 3 sources that back a lot of my talk. And I think most of you know me, but I'm an executive coach, a private practice, and then I work, and I'll talk about Stanford LEAD program, particularly with Jeff Pfeffer, amazing course that I recommend. I lecture here in Madrid at IE Business School, and then I publish, I write, and I speak. So Harvard Business Review and Forbes are where you'll find most of my stuff. And the focus here is what's the disconnect about what we're told and what really is playing out. And we need to know what plays out, because I think that's important. Spend a second on the chat board, and when I say power, what word comes to mind? This is the logo from a series about power. And I don't know what series you guys watch, right? There was Suits, Game of Thrones, right? Okay. Structure, I'm seeing influence. Okay. Just write in the chat board here what comes to mind when I say the word power. Okay. Energy. Leader. Okay. We associate power with leaders. Interesting. I think every one of us should be thinking about what power we have in our lives or how you can build it. I think sometimes we get messages that we're powerless because we're at a certain stage, early in the career, late in the career, or the function that we're in. Oh, I think, yeah, Good Wife was one of my favorites. Responsibility, success, okay? Well, I encourage you to think about power. I liken it a little bit to fire, which is it's this really powerful force that we kind of take for granted. And, it can be used in burn, the whole Western U.S. down. But it also, if it's harnessed, can, light our village, power our houses in a really productive way. So it depends how it's used. But one of these things about fire is if you don't have it, you're going to kind of be sitting in the cold without light back in kind of the caveman days. So I want you to think about that. In power, most of the adjectives that kind of come here are negative, and people are uncomfortable with it. It's called kind of to quote way back in the 1970s, the organization's last dirty secret. It's this force that exists there. And so I do think it's important to have a quick definition so that we're all kind of on the same page here. So I'm just going to offer this one up, which is, your ability to get your way in the face of opposition. Very simple, right? So if, Manlio and I both have an initiative and I'm able to push it through because I have resources and so forth, I by default kind of have more power than he does. And think of it also as the opposite of dependence. So if I don't need Elio to approve something, I'm not dependent on him. So I've got a lot of power, tends to reside up in an organization, but you can have pockets where there's more or less of it. And the last part is it characterizes all of social relationships. There's always this power dynamic. It's an invisible force that's going on. You ever kind of come to the meeting and people defer to one person? Or you come to the meeting and the decision was made in the meeting before the meeting, right? That's where the power actually lies. Like the two people who met before the meeting and made the decision, this other one is just kind of the pro forma. So there's no power in that other meeting. And like I said, it's why I have this up here. Hey, this can be used in different ways. When you've got power, what are you going to do with it? And why is this important? I do think it's important, and why I asked you, if you have more power, what will you do with it, or what do you want with it? Clearly, in the days of large organizations, bureaucracy, hey, you have more power, you can get stuff done. I don't know anyone who would not be happy with that. You also tend to, when you have more power, we can talk about some of the downsides, but one of the upsides is you have more control. And just think about this, right? Your boss isn't telling you to get in there and work on the weekends. So I can control my life. I may have more resources. That often leads to better health, right? Less workplace stress, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of studies on that. And then finally, if you want it, power can really propel you up, right? Career ambition, et cetera. And hey, there is a link between happiness and wealth. It will peter out when you hit like six-figure income. That's what most of the studies show. But if you want it, power here can help you. And we talked at the beginning, and most of you are kind of doing change and innovation. The areas that I see it very much helps and this is kind of a profile of the clients I work with, I get a lot of people who, you know, what got them here won't get them there in the organization, right? Because they're managing much larger people. It's more political. They're fighting for resources for their organization. And so they hit ceilings. Having power can unlock that. Other ones get put in charge of, you know, initiatives. They want kind of an extra edge that helps them get things through, or it's like a new high-stakes situation. Situation with Jill mirrored these, but also sometimes there's a shift, and you want to stay ahead of the changing shift. You know, a new technology, a corporate takeover, a new boss. And then there's the thing around hitting something and having to rebound or pivot to move forward. Okay, second part, and this has come up in what I've said, almost always the word office politics and political skills is used with in conjunction with power. So, you know, I want to define this one as well. This will be the most dense slide, and also I'll get people a copy of this. But so we're clear about office politics, which most of you on the question before, you know, said is a good thing. So if we look here, you know, the ability to maximize or leverage relationships so you can achieve goals. Yeah, this question that was also brought up, right? Is it good for you, your team, the organization? Hopefully there's alignment with all three, but there can be disconnect there. And as we know, organizations, there's hierarchy, flat. Okay, I have clients at Google, it's not flat, there's hierarchy. There's a lot of interdependence. We work on global teams, and there are finite resources. So there's always these kind of disagreements about how or what to do. And those who have some of those strong political skills or have power tend to like get more resources, right? Either make their life easier, they're less dependent on others. And this last point, which I think is really, really important, is that, hey, organizations, I don't know, actually, Lillian, I know your group does a lot with AI. It hasn't displaced us yet because we're still people, and people, as we know, are irrational, okay? We're irrational, but as very good book, the title is, you know, we're irrational, but in very predictable ways. So I like you because you did a favor for me in the past. I feel this obligation in a very predictable way that I'll reciprocate that. You know, I'm intimidated by you. I will tend to defer to you. I got angry, you know, had an upset conversation this morning with something totally unrelated. My son made me angry. I probably unload on the next person in a meeting. So these things from the social science are very important to know because you can harness them. And you should also, because of things like bias and groupthink, which was brought up at the beginning, also be aware of them. Okay? Very, very important part. Okay. So let's have this conversation here, which is around 4 points. Okay? I believe there is a playbook to how you can build power, have more of it in your life and at work to get things done or get whatever your goal is. And we won't have time to cover all that. But I think I want to cover some of these core building blocks around 4 themes, which we can have a conversation around, okay? The first one, and we've touched a little bit on this, is I want to have a very blunt, frank conversation, okay? And, you know, I ask this with a lot of the executives I work with, and I say, you know, describe the leaders. We do this exercise, and you can do this exercise. Go look at the leaders, the projects that succeed, and be like an anthropologist, okay? Leave out your emotion and your opinion. Like, you know, look at those people. You know, who are they? What are their backgrounds? How do they spend their time? How do they act? Okay? When you do this exercise, you'll probably see some patterns, and it's a very good indicator of what the organization is promoting. And the research would show that most of the people who rise are, maybe when they get there, but on their path to get there, they're not the humble, transparent, authentic servant leaders. They do things that get them noticed. They get resources, they build power, they have strong networks. And so this is a question, right? I mean, feel free to put in the chat board if you've got a thought on this. In Harvard Business Review, Margaret Mayo, who teaches here at IE Business School, she wrote this, right? Humble leaders actually, right, the ones who are vulnerable, who get opinions, they actually do perform better. Their companies perform better, okay? But very few of them get, who act like that, rise. And so we see a lot of these, what you would call charismatic narcissists get promoted. So the question is, you know, why? Why is this happening? And I invite you to write in the chat board of, like, you know, what's going on? We see a lot of this, and then we see a lot of those CEOs run their companies kind of into the ground and still walk off with great compensation and parachutes. So something is weird. And, you know, there's a statistic in a lot of the top business schools, right? Most of the graduates, you know, within 5 years, they get derailed. They're kind of told to leave their jobs. So you kind of wonder if the business schools are doing a really good job teaching leadership, you know, what's going on? You know, what's going on here? The key here, and I want you to think a little bit of like a chameleon, okay? And a chameleon knows how to adapt to a situation, to survive, to thrive. But one of the things is, I firmly believe the part in red here is that you have to first take a really hard look at, you know, what does the evidence show? What is actually happening, right? If we kind of wish something to happen, it's not based on reality, we're deceiving ourselves. But a lot of the times is, and I hear this, right? I don't want to play politics. This is what Jill said. You know, she had this aversion to playing politics because it had a negative connotation. When, hey, we're talking about being astute, building relationships, having interpersonal influence, which are all good things. And so a lot of people, just because they have this very rigid definition of politics, of power, or of themselves, right? I'm like an introvert, so I can't do anything. Okay? Most of the skills we can learn, going back to the first point. So I encourage you, in this design thinking way, we were talking about this before, is, you know, personal growth is to try things. And hey, if there's evidence behind it, or the organization, you know, validates some of that, why not try certain things, particularly if what you're doing isn't working, right? If you hit the ceiling and you need to try a new method. So, you know, this came through strong and clear with Jill. So before we could go any further about power and being more political in a good way, she had to first overcome herself. This is really critical. But, you know, the leadership literature saying these positive things sells. It gets a lot of likes and the TED Talks. So it's a big industry. You know, saying being Machiavellian doesn't particularly get you a lot of business, even if there's, you know, evidence that that's way a lot of the world is working. So think about reality and think about how you might be holding yourself back. I mean, think back to 5 or 10 years in your career, and you may have made some shifts. Okay. Now, as a senior director or going to the VP, people may be looking to you. So sometimes you may need to up the command. And then when you build the trusting environment, and only when you've built the trusting environment that Elia was talking about, the safe space, this is the time to, you know, selectively show vulnerability and to get your team engaged. Situation. Look at what the situation is calling for. The second part here, and again, thinking kind of in building blocks of what helps us build power and kind of embrace politics in a good way is, and I encourage you to do this, right, on a piece of paper. You could do it right now. Is pick a person, that think about your initiative or you want to get promoted. Pick a person in power, because who, if they said yes, or they gave you the resources or whatever, that this thing would fly forward. Okay? And I want you to think about who that person is. And then I want you to say, and write down, right? What matters to that person? What's going to get them, whether it's their big bonus or what their, key performance metric is at the end of the year. What is their kind of like, I call it like a business need for those who have done sales. And also think about, hey, what drives their ego? Is this a person who likes their name in lights? Would love to be sitting on another, super leadership committee, or maybe they got pet projects that kind of matter on the side, like what feeds their ego. And then just what's their background, right? What are their hobbies? What do they like to do? And who do they listen to, right? Again, this whole thing about organizations, who's got their right ear? Who do they actually dislike in the organization, right? These are the minefields or the things to be thinking about. What you're really doing here is, the story about the elephant, the image here is, people see from different perspectives. And, oh man, I was just on a call this morning with an executive. We were doing some 360 work. And in the 360 work, one of his peers said, this particular colleague never sees from my perspective. And it bugged the crap out of me. And so being able to take the perspective of what matters to those people, incredibly, incredibly important, okay? You've got to understand the motives of others. Otherwise you just be kind of banging on a door and not being able to resonate at all. Some of you may know the book, True North, which was, a very popular leadership book, which is kind of know your inner compass, etc. Not bad ideas. But I'm going to argue here is not your true north. You need to know the true north of these other key stakeholders. If what you're trying to do, I used to work in China, right? We would automate certain stuff. It's like firing everyone, right? So if you're the guy in the plant and your life, and your job is related to all these people, you are not going to love that initiative. Okay? Now, there may be a time that you've got to come to grips with that, but you need to understand the motives of others. You need to build relationships. Okay? And the higher you go up, you're not always going to love everyone. So you need to find sometimes ways to make those relationships work. This is one of the core skills around, when you say political skills, some very good old research, social awareness, and the ability to take the perspective of others. This is very important when you're trying to manage conflict. And again, politics, organizations, we're fighting over resources, or we're trying to figure out how to optimize resources to kind of get things to be win-win. Important. Okay. Is that a question or no? Okay. Third conversation. Okay. Again, this building blocks again to what helps you build power in organizations, right? So you've gotten over yourself. You're willing to try new behaviors. You've now understood what the motives are of others. Think about that powerful person. Okay. And let me ask you, because you wrote down this person who, if they said yes, boom, your initiative would fly forward. Okay. Do they know you? And if I ask them, I was asking the executive this morning, another one on a 360 is, what are a couple adjectives you would use to describe that? You know, how would that person, what adjectives would they use to describe you? Okay. Now this is actually a good exercise. I would encourage you to go do this, because those adjectives will tell you what your brand is. I spent a long time in marketing. I think a very good definition of brand is what someone says about you when you are not in the room. The image here, right? This is your board, right? This is your senior leadership team. They're behind the glass wall. You guys are all outside. They're having the meeting. I got news for you. Most of them are not even talking about you. Okay, that's first point. The second point is maybe when things come up, how do they describe you? What is your image or brand? Okay. And this is why it's so important to build relationships and also think about your reputation. Okay. Because it's all about perception. I have lots of people who do excellent work, amazing work, but they're either too humble, no one knows about it, they give all the credit to someone else, or someone takes credit. So know that this also may be going on around you. Okay? And it's really pretty simple. Like people above you, because those are the ones who do promote you, you simply can't promote what you do not know. Or maybe they've got this image, I see this a lot. This person is really good project manager. They're really good. When they come, they update me. Okay, they're just kind of telling me the update. But that's not really how they want to think about you if they want to promote you to a more senior position. They want that person to make decisions, to make strong recommendations. There's a good analogy to think about this thing called pie, which is your performance, which, as I've mentioned, studies show is not what actually drives a lot of performance ratings, bonuses, etc. More how people feel about you. There's a lot of subjectivity. So performance is maybe a small piece, and all of you do good work, right? I'm not saying to do bad work, but think about your image and think about the exposure that you're getting. You know, I don't like that you guys are the best kept secrets in your organization. So make sure that you are managing that. And then this fourth conversation, again, building blocks, pieces that you need in place to really think about building power. And this is why I think age is very interesting here. Think about of yourself, where and with whom are you spending your time? Okay, you could do an audit. I saw 40% of your engineers, you'll probably go and calculate that this week. You can look at your, calendars and do an assessment here. Part of this is maybe the people in this previous question don't know you because you never spent any time with them. But look at how much are you spending with the same people all the time, right? My engineering group, my IT group, my design thinking group. How much are you spending with your team? How much are you spending outside of your team? And so you could look at this diagram on the right? This is a typical network. Companies become silos. They become very focused on what they're doing. We become inward, right? You do have to get stuff done, right, in your team in that kind of blue area in the circles. So you need to be thinking about that because networks, and I get it. Networking takes time, is difficult. It's more challenging. You feel like you're more introverted, okay? But again, these skills can be learned. And I'm going to argue for you to think about the network okay, and structural positions, more than necessarily networking, okay? Like, I've got to go out and meet people at the conference, right? Well, we're not meeting as many people because of COVID anyway. But this is a really key point, because if you understand and harness strategic positions in the network, by default, you're going to do networking. Very, very, very key message, okay? And so want to just unpack this for 1 second. And the first idea here, or the research behind this, okay, looked at, this was Ronald Burt at Chicago, very good study, looked at a couple industries, mid-career professionals, North America and Europe, and kind of tracked also career progressions. And he's a specialist in kind of looking at network and network theory in social networks. The individuals who held what we call brokerage positions, you know, they were the red parts that I've circled here, okay? They did better over their career, okay? And we can think about, why is this the case? Okay, and better here was related to upward progression, salary, et cetera. Okay, that better is of course subjective, right? Whatever you want in life. But if you think about that point on the network, these two that are circled, that person, because they're connected to other groups, right? You sit in IT, you talk to marketing all the time, you talk to the field sales, or you're the other one down there, you've got a whole network at Stanford, right? Or whatever, right? Or from different industries, like that you get together for these skill-up sessions. Those people by default are getting new information, because everyone in the blue, you guys all have the same information. It's redundant. You're all engineers. But that person is able to get new information, and information is power these days, right? You can be the first to disseminate it. And if or what information is valuable, that can give you access. It can help you bring value, and you can bring that also to important people. And it's clear innovation is about this as well. So there are lots of ways to do this, right? You volunteer and you run a cross-functional effort. I mean, I did this early in my career. I didn't even realize it at the time. I should have taken more advantage of it. I was setting up a hospital in China, and I was the guy who spoke Chinese and English. I had no other skills, marketable skills, and everything in the project had to go through me. CEO wanted to talk with me every week. The general counsel in the US wanted to talk with me every week. All the consultants came through me. Yes, more work, but I was that circle, right? It got me lots of exposure. I could manage image. I could sit down with the CEO. She would give me the time I needed because she needed information. And then I could share information. So there's lots of ways that this could work, right? You run a speaker series like this. You're the one who takes the notes of a meeting. And you can think about this in a lot of different contexts. So inside that blue area, these are your so-called strong ties. And we all spend too much time with people like ourselves. Weak ties are like the one on the bottom with someone on the outside. Weak ties are actually, you maybe talk to them every 6 months, right? Or you form a relationship. They're actually pretty easy to maintain. And a lot of research, I mean, this goes back to the 70s. Mark Granovetter at Stanford, that's the way people find jobs. So if you think about network positions, being a connector or a bridge, Ronald Burt calls it kind of a structural hole that you have a brokerage position. Venture capitalists are very good examples. This is important to think about. And if you put yourself, because I've written a lot of articles around networking. I mean, going out to conferences and cocktail parties is pretty exhausting. I mean, a lot of us have kids now. You don't have time for that. hey, if it's fun, great, go do it. And you probably want to do some element of it. But if you have that position, the networking takes care of itself. You constantly are getting this refreshed group or new ideas that come through it. And you do it well enough where you have power in that position, people want to come to you. This is the other part about power. The more you have, the more it attracts other people because you have resources, you have relationships, etc. So it's almost like a snowball, right? Once you get things going, you know, you look at some of these heavy influencers on social media or a podcast, right? They can get any guest in the world because the guest wants to be part of that. Think about that important idea, okay? And then you know, put these pieces together. Again, very important building blocks, right? The chameleon who thinks about the situation. What's the true north of other people? So you understand their motives. What's the perception others have of you, right? What's the brand? What are they saying about you when you're not in the room? And harness the network. And Jill, right? I've kind of walked through different pieces that we worked on together. She said, well, you know, if it's interpersonal influence or I think in a different way, I've got to do these things. I've got to build some of these relationships. I should get noticed. And she had to, in some ways, start over because she was fired and she had to build in a new industry. But that, you know, and then connections outside. I mean, I always tell you, always have 1 or 2 job offers on the outside so you know your market value. Just smart. More alternatives also give you more power. We see this all the time in negotiation. And so Jill doing great, Joe is doing great. And that's, again, what I would like for you guys, whether that's a change initiative, whether it's your own career, right? Be the, you know, the speeding bullet train. Don't be derailed. And this is, I cannot tell you how much kind of the more power you have. It's another discussion about some of the, you know, issues that can come with power. But on the whole, think about power as, hey, it's going to, you know, light the village. It's going to power us. And how it can be harnessed in ways, you know, that help you in your career and have more of what you want. I know we've kind of run a little bit over. I know we started a little bit late. I do want to have time to take questions. But I also wanted to point out a couple resources. I think there's many ways, you know, you can be working on these things. Again, take away one tip from this and go apply it or go try it. I mean, I get a lot of executives say, well, that won't work. Hey, the evidence is here that the network will help you. Go do it. Tell me in 2 weeks if it doesn't work. Then we can kind of iterate or adjust or diagnose why it wasn't working. A lot of you know I love him because he's amazing, and I've been very influenced by what he's written. Jeff Pfeffer at Stanford, who has a course in the LEAD program on power. I mean, the name of the book, Why Some People Have It and Others Don't, speaks for itself. And Leadership BS, if you want to look at, you know, what's wrong with some parts of the leadership industry. And there is a new offering, which you may want to look into. We can send a link out of a kind of on-demand short course around power that's just been launched. So that can be a way to be exposed through the books, or if you're not doing the whole Stanford LEAD program, the part of it. If authenticity gets in your way or you think you cannot change, the single best article is Professor Ibarra, London Business School, called The Authenticity Paradox. You can Google that. She's also got a TED Talk. Just fantastic, kind of getting you to think about how being yourself may actually hold you back. And I have articles too, you know, I write in this theme. It's Harvard Business Review. I wrote a fairly controversial one about how anger can be very useful if you harness it well. But everyone shies away from it. But a very, very powerful force if you can direct it. So that's when I wrote, because I think everyone's angry these days. We can see lots of that going on. How can you harness that? And there's a lot of research that shows it can be effective. And of course, I do executive coaching. This is kind of my area. So I encourage you to avail you to different resources that can help you on your journey going forward. I do love it if you write on the chat board, write it down to yourself, email me. What's one personal takeaway? Or if you just remember the chameleon, or you just remember being that point on the network, and then how could you go try that? Because everything I've talked about here is about building power, which we could all use more of. So I will open it to questions here. I'm seeing stuff, right? Accept reality. What's a good way to know if people are talking about you, right? This is why you also have to have those networks around. And, these are the kind of conversations, it's a little harder now in our environment, but, around the coffee machine, going out to lunch with people, never eat alone. Don't sit there at your desk. You can actually, gossip can be useful. But sometimes it's also point blank asking people. I would do this on a regular basis, is like, hey, what are the top 3 adjectives that you think about when you think about me? Sometimes you don't always like what you hear, or it's kind of this thing like, oh, very good implementer. Well, guess what, right? I don't want to be an implementer anymore. I want to be a leader that's not doing the implementation. So you got to think about how you would shift your brand in that case. And again, simple things like how you show up differently. Get someone on your team to do the reporting of the update. And those little things done repeatedly with exposure can shift perception. So Rohit, yeah, very good question. Yeah. And I would say this point, I see Shree's got one here, direct feedback. I always think feedback is good in whatever form you can get it. You have to realize sometimes people are biased, or they'll tell you things like, oh, you should be softer and more gentle. When in fact, like research does show, if you're kind of forceful and directive, oh, you're seen as more commanding, like stuff more. So you'll have to kind of parse through that. They don't have time to talk about that in depth. But a trick, Shree, is go to people, instead of use the word feedback, ask them for their advice, or however that translates into whatever language you use, right? Because feedback is kind of like, I'm looking for like your weaknesses, and people don't want to ask sometimes because it's like making me look weak. But advice is good because it kind of bonds us together. Like, I'm Helio, give me my advice on this presentation. I'm saying, Helio, you've got I respect you. You've got some good, thinking on this. And I want you, we're partners now. And so using that word advice can be very, very helpful. Not in all situations, right? Sometimes you'll want to get feedback, or your companies have those mechanisms. A lot of companies are dumping the kind of feedback. So if your company doesn't do it, go get it yourself. Don't wait for your companies to go do stuff for you, right? They're not always thinking of your best interest. Sharing power, another appointment, right? Patricia, great to have you aboard. I'm glad, and again, thank these guys for the opportunity. I'll put up here, there's my contact info. You can connect to me also on LinkedIn if we're not already connected.